Hey, this is Doug, and in this screencast, I'm going to give you a little bit more information about how to use R in a little bit of a more sophisticated way than we've done before, and hopefully at the end of this screencast, you'll be a little bit more comfortable making graphs on your own. So here we are inside of our studio, and this should look pretty familiar. Console over here, this is your workspace, and again, this is your files. Now, as I mentioned, you can do some pretty cool stuff. Basic calculation in the console. Remember, 2 plus 2, basically a big calculator. But that's really not all that useful. So one of the cool things is you can actually take big data sets and load them into RStudio and then manipulate them directly once you're inside the program. So to do that, we're going to actually create a directory. So you're going to see a directory, and directory is just, it means folder. It's exactly the same thing. If you click on R here, you're going to see you're in your home directory, which is where you're going to log into, then R. Now I'm going to create a new directory, a new folder, just by clicking this button. You get a dialog. We're going to work with some data from Lake Mead, so I'm going to call it Lake Mead. I just put underscores as a habit. Spaces work fine. And it appears right there. So you click on that. It should make some sense. There's nothing in it since we just created it. To upload a file, you just click Upload and then choose File. And here you're going to, this is your own file system on your own computer that you're working on. On my desktop here, I've got a file called Lake Mead Elevation, one column.csv. Now this .csv may be a little unfamiliar to you, but it's essentially comma separated values, and it's a really common and useful format for manipulating data. And you can generate these files directly in Excel using the Save As options. So if we click on that, we choose it. Is indeed what we want to upload. And there it is now sitting inside of this directory, Lake Mead, which is inside of the directory called R, which is inside of our home directory on the r.denison.edu server. To see what's inside this file, you just simply have to click on it. And it opens up another panel over here. This one's called the scripting window. And the scripting window is a little different than the console. Think of the console as a way that you can execute a command. You can do it once, but you can't go back and re-execute that command, at least not conveniently. The scripting window allows you to write a whole series of commands in a file. You can save that file, and that way you can go back and you can stop working on a project, or you can go back and revisit something that you did in the past. So anyways, in this tab right here, you can see we're looking at the content of this file. And it actually highlights the path. That's what just popped up. And the first item here is the column header, the name of the column, elevation in feet. The second observation, it was actually blank in Excel, so think of that as an empty cell. R puts NA in there and thinks of that, or interprets the NA as essentially a blank value. And then all these observations, which are the elevation of the lake in feet. And you can see there's quite a bit of data in here. Something like 900 values. 961 pieces of information in this file. So obviously you wouldn't want to type these in by hand like I've shown in a previous screencast. Okay, so if we wanted to start to actually use this data, what we want to do is create a file or an R script. And the way you do that is you click on either, you can do this with File menu. You could go to File, this drop down, see New, and then R script. Or you can use this graphical thing right here, and you get a new R script. And so now this is a place where we can actually write commands, and the commands will be executed, and we'll be able to observe the results. So the first thing to do when writing an R script is to set your working directory. And what that does is it tells R where the file you want to interact with is. So go up to Session, then under Set Working Directory, choose Directory. And in this case, our file is in Lake Mead, so we choose it. Notice down in the console, a command was actually executed, and it looked like this. So I suggest you get in the habit of taking that, just copy it, and put it as the very first line in your program. Now the next step is to get the information that's in this file, the Lake Mead elevation file, and read it into memory. And to do that, I'm going to create a variable called lake.elevation, and then I'm going to use the read.csv command. And in here, what you want to do is use quotes and just name the file. In this case, Lake Mead. Now if you hit Tab, it should autofill because it knows what directory you're going to look in. Now, what you can do at this point to see if your data, to actually look at it and see that it's in memory, is you want to use the source command. And what source does is it's actually going to run this command and then this command. And when you do that, you see you now have a lake elevation variable. It's got 960 observations, and there's one variable. If you click on this, lake elevation, there's all your information, and it looks a little bit more familiar now because it's sort of in a format that should remind you a little bit of Excel. To make a plot of this data, you go back to your script and use the plot command. Now there's a little bit of a trick here. This variable, lake elevation, is actually the name of something called a data frame. Now a data frame is, think about it, is exactly the same thing as an Excel worksheet. So in Excel, sometimes you have a tab, you might have different sets of data, and you can click between one worksheet and another within a file. Each one of those worksheets is a data frame, essentially. So if you want to plot the data that's inside of lake elevation, first we have to tell it which data frame to plot. Here it's going to be lake elevation, and I used autocomplete. Now you use the $sign as a separator, and that tells you what column to use. And remember, the column inside of this data frame was called elevation, or elev.ft. Now to see this plot, you just click on source again, and you get a graph that looks like this. The last step to be able to get your graph out of RStudio is to go down to Export, save your plot as a PDF. In this case, we'll use landscape format. We'll change the paper size to letter. Here we can change the name of the file. And save it. And now your plot has been saved. And so if you go back to Files, and notice that inside of this directory, Lake Mead, there's now two files. One, your original data, and also your graph as a PDF. If you want to export this to your local computer, just click on this toggle right here, go to More, and export it. It'll ask you if you want to do that and download it. You just say yes, and it downloads to your computer. So that's the end of this screencast. Hope you've learned something about how to make plots, and don't forget to save your R script.